We are recording again. Welcome to our Infrastructure and Land Use Committee meeting here at the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce. I'm Brian Levine with the Chamber. And before I hand it over to our co-chairs to get the meeting started, I did want to give a couple commercials for some upcoming programming that we have that is related to this committee. We have Leslie here, who is chair of our legislative committee, and on Thursday, October 12th, Leslie, we have a great program with 3 out of the 4 most recently appointed members of the House of Delegates. As you know, the Montgomery delegation has seen a lot of changes lately with members of the delegation going to the Moore administration. So we have 3 out of the 4 coming in to talk to us. So I'm excited about that. And Ann Kadimian, our Economic Development Committee chair, is on the Zoom. I will just talk about tomorrow's Economic Development Committee meeting. It's the economic impact of USG's Lab for Entrepreneurship and Transformational Leadership. I'm very excited to learn more about that. Frankly, I don't know enough about it yet. So, Ann, that's a really good program, in my opinion. So we hope you can join us for that. And for this committee, the Infrastructure and Land Use Committee, Gus and Bob, I'll just talk about our programming roster is filled out for the rest of the year. Of course, today we have very special guest Artie Harris. On November 14th, we have Pam Dunn and Levu Nadu, both are legislative attorneys with the Montgomery County Council, and are going to talk about everything related to land use, zoning, planning. So those are the 2 experts in the council. I really look forward to learning more about that. So similar theme for this meeting and the next meeting. And then we'll change themes. The next meeting after that for this committee is December 12th. We're very excited to have the State Highway Administrator, William Pines. Now, he was just appointed to this role in the last several weeks. You know, a lot of things that we care about related to what's under his purview at the Maryland Department of Transportation, including traffic congestion issues and with the American Legion Bridge and the I-270 and I-495 corridors. So he's going to talk about the SHA's priorities, his priorities, and of course that project. And with that, let me hand it over to our co-chairs, Gus and Bob. Introduce yourselves. And
okay, thanks, Brian. Good morning, everybody. And the way we run these committee meetings is that we'll hear from our speaker, who today, of course, is Artie Harris, the new chair of the County Planning Board. And then we will have introductions so that everybody can know who's in the room and who's maybe on the phone as well. Can we do that, Brian?
Yeah.
And so we'll do introductions. Artie will then give his presentation. Then we open it up to questions or comments from the group, and we're done by 11:30. Now, normally, just so you all know, we meet at 8:30 until 10. So the meetings that Brian's referring to that are coming up with Pam and et cetera, that will be 8:30 to 10. But today we're meeting because of various schedule adjustments. We're meeting today to 11:30. And for those of you who have matters, that you may have matters that have to go before the County Planning Board, I can't help but notice sitting here that we do have 3 chairs of the County Planning Board. That's a quorum. So if you have something, someone wants to make a motion, I think Artie, Casey Anderson, and I are happy to entertain a motion. You know, in terms of ex parte and all those rules, I don't know if they apply in this room, but I'll defer to Artie, the current chair. But I'm going to turn it over to Bob, and then we'll go around and see who's here, and then turn it over to Artie.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Bob Elliott, Land and Development, Gus's co-chair. Always a tough act to follow because there isn't much to cover at this point. I would just say that for everybody who may be on the phone, it can be very challenging for us to see you all the way in the back of the room. So if you do have a question for Artie, I think it's called reactions down at the bottom bar. Look for reactions and wave your hand and just stick it up. And that way we'll be able to see if you need to be called upon. That would be very helpful for us. Thank you. With that, do we want to go?
Okay, yeah. So I'm Gus Bauman. I'm at the law firm of Beveridge and Diamond.
Casey Anderson, Rogers Consulting.
Debbie Spielberg, Office of the County Executive. We're Bella Galena with Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation.
Again, Brian Levine with the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce.
Casey Cerner with Miles and Stockbridge.
And Scott Wallace with Miles and Stockbridge.
Alexis Reed with the Chamber.
Randall Renfro with Rogers.
Matt LeVay with MHG.
Wendy Rivard with Rockville Economic Development.
Leslie Weber with Johns Hopkins University in Medicine.
Steve Robbins with Berkshire.
Barbara Ash, Executive Vice President of the Chamber. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
And Danielle Freeman with Pepco Government Affairs.
Brian?
Yeah, so if you're able to and you're on the Zoom, can you introduce yourself? Let's start with our board member, Dr. Ankademian.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome, Chair Harris. Ann Kademian with the Universities at Shady Grove.
Kathy?
Good morning,
Hi.
everybody. John Stierhoff with Venable.
Kathy Fowler from On the Mark Media, public relations and marketing firm.
And Chuck?
Good morning, everyone. Chuck Connor, Venable.
Saul?
Saul Cohen, interested citizen.
Thank you, Saul. And Mel, I see you on the screen. Go ahead, Mel.
Mel Toll with Lee Development Group in Silver Spring.
Feezy?
Good morning, Fizi Halim, Montgomery College, Business Solutions Manager.
I think Gus and Bob, I believe that's everyone.
Great. Well, before Artie was named as chair of the planning board by the county council, he was vice president for real estate at Montgomery Housing Partnership. I'm sure a lot of people understand who MHP is, what they do in terms of development of housing here. So Artie was there for a number of years, and before that, Artie was vice president at the Bozzuto Development Company, also doing residential as well as commercial development, and holds degrees from Purdue and Stanford. And so with that, we're very happy to have Artie with us today.
Yeah, well, thank you, Gus, and good morning, everyone, and happy to be back. I was here maybe 4 or 5 months ago when I was did my rounds of interviews with various agencies before appointed by the board. So you as you said, he steals your thunder. He does all about what you're talking about me. But yeah, this big picture, I have most of my career has been in multifamily development and in Montgomery County, a 23-year resident. And for most of that time, I lived in Tacoma Park, and we love that community. I have a lovely wife and 2 daughters, and everywhere we've lived around the country, it's been communities like that, walking to Metro, walking to the downtown area. It's just a lovely, diverse community. And I love DC so much because it's a very highly educated community. And so we really love that environment. So, and as for free things I do, hobbies, when there's time, I love riding my bike. Casey's a big bike rider, love riding. Also a big kayaker and a gardener. My grandparents have had a family farm about 3 hours south of here. I lived in Chicago. I'd come up and help them in the summers on the family farm. And my wife and I, we own it and we take care of it now. So get back down to this a small town called Disputana, Virginia.
What do you grow?
Right now, we rent the land out to the crop land out to a farmer, and he grows corn and soybeans there. But I love planting trees, so maybe 2 years ago I planted a lot of pecan and hazelnut trees there, and we planted a couple hazelnut in our yard, and we'll see how it goes. My wife loves this. She's a native. If you want to talk to her about gardening, about natives and and non-invasives, and she just loves that stuff. So that's a little bit about me. And I just want to talk a little bit about the board. We have a new board. Then to talk about parks and planning, some of the initiatives we're doing. And I want to spend most of the time listening from you about what are your goals or what are your thoughts about the planning board? What are your wishes in order to create more development or in the county? So I'll start with the next slide, please.
I got it.
You can go to the next one, please.
Hi, Brian.
Yeah.
I keep hitting the wrong button.
Yeah, so as of, the board turned over this year, from February through May, we have a new board. And so I'm the chair. Mitra Pedawam is the Vice Chair, she came from, Casey knows her well. She spent a lot of time in the Parks Department, and she ran DPS for a little bit. And then we have, on the left there, you have Sean Bartley, and then you have Josh Linden, and then on the right, James Hedrick. So a very strong board. I really love this board. The county council picked well, in my estimation. So we're gelling really well. One of the first things I said during my interview with the council is that we would have a retreat early on. We did have this retreat, and it was great for bonding, and I meet with them for coffee and lunch and things like that. So I believe we have a great board to start this next 4 years out with. Next slide, please. And I wanted to talk about some of our priorities. As you know, the county council approved Thrive 2050. That's how our new growth plan, and we hadn't had a new one in 60 years. Casey was very instrumental in helping get that going. It was approved last October. And a couple of things is focusing on, community equity. We realized that, there have been quarters of the county that did not have as much as some of the others. So we're focusing now in Thrive as we do new master plans on making sure we have complete communities around the county, not just housing, but housing, parks, places where people can go for daily needs. So that's what we're really pushing for in all the new master plans that will be coming through. We're really high on environmental resilience, and then also about economic health, like things that how do we have strong businesses? What do we do on land use policy to have strong businesses in the county? So that's one. And then also this board, because of my background and Mr. Hedrick's background, we're really pushing accelerating housing production in the county. Really accelerating housing production. I want to get some of your ideas on that, especially affordable. I mean, affordable at all range and all product types. For sale, multifamily, sort of the missing middle types. So, and we're also really focusing on regional development, regional planning policies and things like that. So transportation and also water usage. There's a big, most 80% of our water comes from Potomac.
Mm-hmm.
So if we had any major shocks to that water supply, we'd be in trouble. So we're just thinking of ways, how do we create more opportunities to be resilient in terms of water management? Okay. Next slide. So the planning staff, the planning staff is approximately 150 very, very committed individuals. And, our goal is, it's about improving the quality of life for families in the county, right? Not based with respect to land use issues, not just for our kids today, but looking down the future for kids and families in the future. And we're always trying to balance land use and transportation strategy. So that's a big key. We do what you've seen, a lot of the developers, we do this review development applications. But there's also a lot of data gathering and studies that the planning staff does. Like on many of you, I've been on the side where I'm doing for plan reviews to getting my projects approved. But I've learned, and Casey and Gus know that the planning staff does a lot of research to help inform a lot of the decisions we make. So I'm really proud of the staff for that. I didn't know that. I couldn't appreciate that as much being on the other side, but they're a great committed staff and doing cutting edge research. And then we also do a lot and more of this preservation studies, documenting sites that need to be preserved in the county, and that's part of what the planning department does. Next slide, please. And some of it's hard to see there, but just what are we doing today? So, the planning staff does studies. They bring them to the board for recommended approvals. Once the board approves it, they go to county council for final approval. So some things that are in the pipeline for final approval now is this pedestrian master plan that many of you may have heard of. The council gave a straw vote yes last week, and so there'll be a final vote soon on that. And one of the first master plans that has gone through since Thrive 2050 is the Fairland and Briggs Cheney master plan. That is in the council for work groups now. In the board now, we're starting looking at work groups for the Tacoma Park Minor Master Plan Amendment. You may have you know, Tacoma Park, the listservs lit up when that went out for, through the community for review, but that Tacoma Park, needs housing, they need other, developments in that community, and the, Adventist site is, you know, now that they've moved, that the hospital moved, their site is ripe for development, so we're looking at how do you redevelop the Adventist site, which is a very large site. And then the other projects in progress, there are many there, I'm not going to read them all off, but many of you may be interested in the Great Seneca Plan, where our life sciences are, most of our slated to go. So we're looking at the Great Seneca Plan. We'll talk a little bit later about the growth of infrastructure policy, which many of you are interested in. Every 4 years, we have to, by law, we have to update that growth and infrastructure policy, and that'll be going to the council in November of 2024. And then we're just doing several of those. We're doing, right now, we're doing University Boulevard Corridor study. We're doing a Randolph Road study. So lots of work that the planning staff is doing right now. So just gives you an idea of some of the things we're working on. The next one. So I talked about the growth and infrastructure policy, you know, that in the past, and in case you've been involved in that, before we had a moratorium on development in many areas because we've maxed out our school capacity, but that was a very innovative policy that Casey and group came up with, that, you know, we're going to not create moratoriums, but we're going to have an extra fee to provide for more school development. And so we're now, that was started in 2020, 4 years later now, we're going to review that policy, what worked, how is it working, what should we tweak if we need to tweak anything. And so staff is working on that now, and that'll come to the board in the springtime, and then it'll go to council in the summer for them to vote on at the end of the 2024. And then one of the last couple things I wanted to talk about is you may have heard about this development review process work group. This is where Delegate Lopez had asked us to look at how can we make the development process, review process more efficient, right, and faster, because we know with a lot of you, if we make it faster, time is money, get your projects done, approved quickly, get your building permits more quickly, and then and we can bring projects online more quickly. So that process, this development review process is winding up. There were 24 or so recommendations, and some of them related to state things that the state has control over, and others related to what either the county exec or the council have control over, and some they don't, that we're planning on doing anyway. So you should know that we're always looking at ways to improve the process, but this is also putting a framework for us to look at this in more detail and implement the recommendations here, and also recommendations that we've been working on behind the scenes. But it's not just the planning department, it's other county agencies, it's DPS, DP, Department of Transportation. So all of us will be working together to come up with working on making our process more efficient.
Pepco.
And Pepco, I'm sorry, yeah. And then looking at the state highway department, all that touch. So last, talk about parks. I don't know if you know how large the park system is, and I put a slide up here. Well, the county has over 419 parks, and the linear, and that have streams in them. Some of them don't. So it talks about the number of basketball courts, 227 basketball courts. I mean, you could read through this, but the park system is huge. It's huge. It's wonderful, right? I don't know. I mean, Sligo Creek is near my home. We are out on Sligo Creek maybe 3 times a week. I ride my bike. When I can't ride to work, I ride up Sligo Creek up to the Wheaton headquarters. But there's so many parks, great parks, and Casey was very instrumental in not only making sure the parks are well maintained, there was funding for parks, but also, I guess over the past, I don't know how many years, Casey was focusing on urban parks. And so you'll see that, we buy certain properties and we create urban parks there. So we're really proud of our parks. We think, especially during pandemic, it was so important for families to get out on parklands. We're closing down some of the parks parkways on the weekends so that families can go out. So it's really, really important to maintain and grow our park system. And the park system has over 800 employees. I don't know if you knew how large it was, and it also has a police system, Parks Police System. The next slide, please. And highlighting some of our parks projects there. It's hard for you to see, but some of the fields that the director, Mike Riley, was, that we recently completed this Blair High School track system. Some of the things that are also will be opening in the fall is just, I don't know if you ever go near the Hillendale Park on New Hampshire, just north of the Beltway. It's a huge park that we just redone with natural turf, and so we really put a lot of money in the park system because that's what the residents want. We had a public hearing a month ago, and you could be amazed at how many people came out and spoke for the parks and what they wanted. Paved trails, not paved trails, the botanical garden to be redone, a lot of things in Wheaton Regional Park, all around the county. And I don't know if you know, but we have a cricket field. In the area. It's a regulation-sized cricket field. So we're really trying to survey people what's needed, what's coming, the pickleball courts. The park system just is absolutely wonderful. Yeah. And there's a Parks Foundation. If you ever want to give, there's a Park Foundation you can contribute to. And what drives the parks funding and projects is this PROS plan that Parks, Recreation, and Open Space plan which drives. It's like a strategic plan for parks. Like what's most important, what are we going to fund, and what's the timing for funds. So that's what we're doing. And Gus, you talked about you live in Woodside?
In Silver Spring.
In Silver Spring. Well, so when along the Purple Line, there's a Liddensville park that the board voted on to approve moving forward with. Right now it's a laydown area for the Purple Line, but that's going to be a beautiful, beautiful park, state of the art. Yeah. Next. So I just wanted to, I couldn't think of a better job to have to be the chair of the planning board. The Parks and Planning are doing such great things in the county. There's just things you may not know. The top is a picture. The Parks Department has this trail stewardship program where in the summer, they have programs for kids. These are the high school kids that they're two-week sessions where they teach these kids about how to, trail maintenance. And at the end of the 2-week period, they give them all mountain bikes. And it's just so wonderful. I went to one of the graduations. Get them off the streets, give them with kids, learning about the park system, sort of like paying it forward for them to get interested in that. And they got a bike, and each one of them had to give a little 2-minute speech at the end. And just was wonderful for them saying what they appreciated in their own way. And then another one is in the bottom middle was the Parks also does, I don't know if you ever do any boating, there's the Little Seneca Creek, where it runs right into the Potomac. So the Parks they have a program in the summer where this is one where they were teaching kids with developmental disabilities how to kayak. And so we have a handicap accessible ramp there. And so it was just another wonderful thing to see. And on the left, there's the board during our retreat. And then on the right, the director, Mike Riley, and Vice Chair Pedoem and myself at the Scotland's celebration at the ballpark there at the beginning of at the end of the summer. So you should know that you have a strong Parks and Planning system, and you have a strong board, and we're all about, our vision is creating a quality county where everyone could thrive, whether you're an individual, a business, a family. And so that's what we're all about. So that's one last slide there. That's the end of my presentation, but there's ways, you know this, but just to, if you want to get in contact with us, contact with me. There's my email address. And then if you want to testify or send information, just look us up on our
our website, but you should know that you have a strong board and a strong park and planning development team. Thank you.
Thank
So,
you.
and I'm open to any questions
Great.
you may have.
Great. Thank you so much, Artie. That was a terrific overview of what's going on. And it's a lot of stuff. And of course, they work closely with the council, you know, on so many of these things, as Artie has pointed out. But so much of what they do, they're the final say with development proposals. They're the final say for commercial, residential, institutional, industrial developments. The planning board holds those hearings, and that's it. But with the master plans and the park initiatives, it's a partnership between the board, which initiates these things, with the county council. So with that, questions or comments for Artie?
Yes.
Artie, good morning. Thank you for coming. Now that we have Thrive and we're starting to get used to it and it's you know, becoming, people are reading it.
Right.
You know, you've got older master plans that were done before Thrive that may not have support some of the same principles, particularly, you know, housing, encouraging housing, encouraging density, encouraging and the growth of housing for especially underserved people. So how do you balance what Thrive does versus these older master plans that may not, you know, promote and further what's the goals of Thrive? How do you do them together, basically?
Yeah, good question. So it was the best of my understanding that Thrive usurped the old master plans, and in every new in every new master plan that we're working on will be incorporated into Thrive's principles. So if you feel that there's an issue with if you have a specific project where that you're having an issue with those two, please come and see me or something like that. But that is my
But like a perfect example is like these old master plans have zoning that is really inconsistent with Thrive and and what's going on, and you can't sort of just like fix that by saying here's what Thrive is. I mean, you have to go through a process that either rezones the property or you do a master plan or something that addresses that. So I think that's sort of what you're getting at.
You've got two different things. You definitely are going to need some zoning changes to implement Thrive completely. But in the meantime, you have, a requirement of compliance, finding a master plan compliance.
Right.
And so you have an older master plan that may not support a project for whatever reason.
Right.
You have Thrive coming along and saying, no, we need to provide housing, especially for underserved people.
Right.
And I think it's probably a matter of filtering down to staff level and to understand that.
Yeah.
And to apply that.
Yeah, so I misunderstood. So yes, you're right. So one of the things at the board, we're trying to go back and prioritize. You see some of the studies and master plans we're doing now. We're trying to go back as quickly as possible, go back and look at new master plans. Look at the areas again so that we can change them to be more consistent with Thrive. So what you see there was sort of in the older system, but as I said, Fairlands Briggs Cheney was the first new one, and then we're going to do looking at the University Quarter and Randolph Road Quarter. But if there's some in particular you think there's a big bang for the buck, and that it says we prioritize these new master plans, then we'd be open, very, very open. And maybe in the short term, there may have to be some, I don't know, maybe text amendment or whatever to get those projects that you think merit upzoning or different zoning changes in the priority. Okay, so yeah.
More work to be done, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
And let me just note, and then we'll go to you, of course. Let me just note for folks who are listening, either here in the room or through Zoom, just a little quick context. Thrive 2050 is the new county general plan. Now, what that means is it's like the super master plan. That is, it's a plan for the whole county. And then these area master plans that are being talked about, you have like the Bethesda Chevy Chase plan, the Potomac plan, the Germantown plan, the Clarksburg master plan. You have these much older master plans which were enacted prior to Thrive 2050, the new general plan being adopted by the county council and the Park and Planning Commission recently. And so there is this conflict between the new countywide plans, which calls for more, and a lot of these area master plans, which don't. And so that's what's being talked about here. Yes.
Sure. Well, my question is really going to be how do you have cross-pollination of ideas with Rockville and Gaithersburg? But Rockville is using a floating zone tool to deal with the same issue because they also just passed their 2040 plan. And so Ricky Barker, who's the planning director, has had council approve these floating zones so that you can have an outdated plan come up to the master plan sooner.
Thank you. Yeah.
And Rockville and Gaithersburg have their own independent planning and zoning and master plan authority. And then there are 5 tiny communities in the county that do, but the big 2 that are outside the direct control of the county council and the Park and Planning Commission are the cities of Rockville and Gaithersburg.
And from an economic development perspective, since that's what I do, I'd love to see, I really like it when we're all at the table exchanging ideas and creating more opportunities or venues for that to happen. So I don't know what you all do on the planning side to date, but it would be great to have forums where you guys exchange ideas.
Oh, that would be great. You mean like, for example, with Rockville or, no, we do talk, the planning staff does talk, but we should share more ideas. And also, I think what we were trying to do, I think there are a couple of studies going, this attainable strategies study, and then after that, hopefully this missing middle study, which will help inform trying to, maybe there would be some overlay opportunity, to help getting more, like as you said, being able to true up the existing master plans to Thrive, right? I mean, to the concepts of Thrive, yeah.
I just have a quick question, Artie. The planning department is now led by a acting planning director. And so the planning board is going to choose a new planning director to be in charge of the planning department. Just wondering what time frame you all have in mind about the appointment of a new planning director.
Yeah, that's a great question, Gus. We're currently interviewing folks for the planning director position, and we hope to make an announcement within the next couple months. So definitely before the end of the year, but maybe soon. We're also, bless you. Yeah. We're also.
That was a applicant for planning director who was not being interviewed.
Yeah, not being interviewed.
Not being interviewed.
Yeah. Also, if you haven't, so we're also starting the interview process to replace the Parks Director, Mike Riley. And we're hoping to have someone on board before by the end of the year also, before he retires. He's retiring in January.
Right.
So there's a agenda item, I think it's next week. You have a short agenda, but there's a long piece that says the purpose is planning director. It's a closed session. Is that the interviews that you're talking about?
Yes.
So just a reminder to everyone who's online, if you have a question, please raise your hand. I don't see anything at the moment. Any other questions at the moment in the room?
Or a comment?
So Artie, I've got a question for you, because at the time Thrive was in its sort of last stages and pushing towards approval, we were either in the middle of the pandemic or just about out of it. And Thrive is a great document, but in the time since, we have come to realize that the way at least America is working, maybe not necessarily the rest of the world, has changed. Our public transit system is dying, and within the DC metro area, we could argue whether or not it's because the 3 jurisdictions don't fund it or we rely too much on the feds. But that is going to become a bigger and bigger challenge to the tune of billions of dollars. We find people commuting only some days of the week can we find our office market being decimated. After years of watching the office market languish because people were looking at 225 square feet per person down to 150, now we have all sorts of tenants finding themselves downsizing because they're only occupying their offices 3 days a week, and they're rotating around. This is going to change the way we look at the world, and it's certainly going to change the way we look at development. Have you and the board started to engage and think about that outside of the context of Thrive as to what it may take for, I'll call it, next generation development to survive?
Yeah, good question, Bob. We are thinking.
And not easy.
Yeah, no.
You have the answer.
No, yeah.
Perfect. That's why
Not like we're the presidential candidate and I have an answer for that. So no, it's a tough, it's a tough question. I mean, in terms of what is the new equilibrium? We don't know, but we're still.
Thrive is very transit dependent.
Yeah. Well,
and economic development is very office and work dependent. And in a county that is struggling with economic development, how do we move forward?
Well, I mean, we have the downtown areas like
He's glad he's not here.
Oh, yeah. No, it's a different solution for.
Well, every time for rebuttal, then.
Yeah.
Well, by the way, I support Thrive. The challenge has become our world has changed in about a 24-month time frame that's extraordinary. That doesn't mean we should revisit. I think Thrive is a great document. We're coming into a very challenging period here. It's really
document should be living, breathing.
Yeah. And I agree with that. And I think we don't know what the new equilibrium, but I personally wouldn't think that, that it's going to swing that way forever. I mean, there's going to be some new equilibrium, and we're just to figure out. I think so. I mean, there will be people. It's here today that we're going to telework. Some people are going to telework, right? But I think over time, the office space will, but then also we know the suburban office space. Yeah. Some of them shouldn't be there anymore.
Nationally, $1.5 trillion of real estate is going to have to be refinanced for the next 2.5 to 3 years.
Right.
Just putting it out there.
Yeah.
And that's largely our office market. And our office market, and boy, this is the good and the bad of this is the county has certain cores, and our Bethesda, some of our liveliest cores likely stay lively.
Mm-hmm.
But in a lot of these fringy areas that may have been B or C markets,
right?
What becomes of these old office buildings? What is the county going to do to put forth the idea of repurposing, repositioning? One can make the argument sometimes that it's not best to take it down. We spent a tremendous amount of energy and expense putting buildings up. How do we now look at what was an old office sector and say, how do we reposition this office building into residential quickly? Because what's going to matter is going to be putting that thing into production as fast as possible, as economically as possible, because otherwise we're just going to have office buildings sitting vacant.
Well, I think the ones that can be repurposed will be repurposed, right? And are being repurposed, like.
The White Plains building, that White Plains.
And some of them, can be converted to residential. The ones that don't have, they aren't too deep, right? Like 80-foot maximum.
That's a piece of it.
And then others will be, if they can be repurposed, they will, and others will probably need to be redeveloped, right? And
just making sure you've got your eyes wide open.
Well, when the Empire State Building opened.
How fast was that built, Gus?
Has nothing to do with how fast. It took them just 2 years to build it. But the point is, when it opened, the Great Depression was underway and had been underway for 2 years. The Empire State Building stood largely vacant for almost a decade. And a lot of people in the 30s thought the world has changed permanently. But one thing about cities, nothing is permanent. And so I think what we're seeing is this transition that we're in, and it's going to take several years. But remember when the cities were dying in the 70s and 80s, and everyone was fleeing to the suburbs, development, malls, everything. Cities were dying in the 70s and 80s. And whether it was DC or Silver Spring, Rockville, it didn't matter. 70s and 80s were a dark period for urban development. Everything was suburbs, malls, and getting out in the green fields. And a lot of people thought, well, this is the new permanent thing. But then in the 90s and at the turn of the century, people began gravitating back towards the center. So I think what we're going to see is this transition going on for several years. And it's going to take time, and there's going to be a lot of stuff that gets torn down and redeveloped. Other things will be just redone with the building that's there. It's going to be a hodgepodge of everything, and it's going to be years and years of this. But the one thing about city development, if you read anyone who writes about urban development in the world, read Lewis Mumford, read, when you look at how cities have developed over thousands of years, not just here, but worldwide, they grow, they fall, they grow, they fall, they change. There's epidemics, plagues, wars, earthquakes, terrible things happen. They go on for years. Everyone thinks that's the new permanent. My God, the plague, the Black Death, wiped out 50% of the population of just Europe. 50%. The other 50% was terrified, right? Because they knew the Jews created this thing. And so we're terrified. And 50% died. Look what followed the Black Death. Within 100 years, it was the Renaissance. So nothing about urban development or city development is permanent. And I think what Thrive 2050 is doing is talking about the long haul. I mean, let's face it, is looking out 20, 30 years. And it's going to be difficult. I agree with you. It's going to be difficult. We got these area master plans that are woefully out of date, no doubt about it. This is the guy, not me and not this guy, who gets to deal with the day when you take up, okay, we're going to redo the Bethesda Chevy Chase master plan. And then after that, we're going to do the Potomac master plan.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you. We're all long-term thinkers, because we have to be, for our families. And, this is not just, I know it's hard. Dislocation today is hard. If you went long on suburban office buildings, I mean, it's tough. But, but it's a good question. And,
well, as the owner of 200 acres in Clarksburg that's currently zoned for office use, that hasn't been occupied in 15 years, I'd question whether or not it's because there's economic development opportunity in Clarksburg, or whether or not and I believe that we should be focusing in these transit areas. But it does beg the question as to whether or not the zoning for this property has been inappropriate, and whether or not, candidly, residential would be a better fit and use for it, given the needs of the county from a housing perspective.
right, like Clarksburg.
And Clarksburg.
Well, then we're focusing on this. I guess you guys are coming, soon. It's about the complete community.
Can I
Yeah.
just piggyback on that? I mean, I'm, as somebody who has 2 kids and
Right.
kids now, they're looking for single-family homes.
Right.
I don't know how,
Townhomes, or
they
mission
have
middle
townhomes,
homes.
they have, and, one does, but, now wants a yard.
Right.
And, there just isn't, and I, getting back to what is our plan for more, diversity of choice
Right.
of housing.
Right.
Not everybody wants to be in an apartment or a townhouse. So they started there, which a lot of, many of us have. But at some point, you need that, like you said, housing.
No, we're
Single-family homes.
right. Well, that is important. All housing types. They may be a little bit smaller than but yes, detached, attached. I mean, I go through in just an example of attached homes. If you go into Cleveland Park communities, there's some beautiful duplex mixed in with single-family homes there. I mean, it's just I think we're going to have to look at some different types, but yes, single-family homes.
It's a matter of time before you poke the bear.
Oh, yeah, okay, all right.
I was trying to come to your defense, because, now that I'm in the dreaded private sector, Bob, I think I might be able to help point out some things in Thrive that help you out on your concept issues. But
Please.
that's another question. And Barbara, there's some material in Thrive that I think will give you some ammunition on the, diversity of housing. It's not just about missing middle, it's about the whole spectrum of housing choices. But so, like Scott said, everybody should read the document now, like it's, that it's been adopted. But I digress. What I wanted to ask you is, what your thoughts were on affordable housing. As you may or may not be aware, there was a big push on affordable housing, try to look at what could be done with land use regulation in 2017-18 when Nancy Florin was kind of on her way out. And she decided that was going to be a big sort of, effort to try to do that before she turned out. And there were a number of changes made, bumped up the requirements in some places, changed some of the height you can get with, and bonus density with additional affordable units. But I wondered if you had some ideas, whether it was from your, background at MHP that are more related to real estate finance, some of the county's programs or subsidies, funding, loans, lending programs, pilots, those sort of things, or things that relate to land use regulations, permitting, zoning.
Yeah, good question. So I think pilots are great opportunities for developers if they didn't have to do property tax pilots. I think they're able to create a lower price point living condition. And also I think something that the county exec could do right now, so the MPDUs are pegged at 70% AMI. Well, why not have that a floating scale that doesn't have, but no net negative impact on the developer, right? So why not have, instead of having 15% at 70% AMI, why can't you have 15%, but maybe some are at 50, some are at 70, some are at 80, depends on the area, but with no net negative impact to the developer. That's something that I think DHCA should study, or we should.
How do you close the loop? How do you do that?
Well, or your the suggestion, I hear you, if you take 70, you could go take some at 80 and some at 50.
Some at 50.
Oh, you're talking like that?
But yeah. Then that works, but oftentimes the people have to understand that because you're accepting 50, that's not a 1-to-1. It's not one up at 80 and one down at 50. It's probably more like 2 or 3 up at 80 and one down at 50.
Well, the point is to work out but it could be, and maybe not, but it could be, there's some appropriate, you're still providing just in 100 units, 15% MPDUs, but some are at a lower MI. But if you go much lower, there's some point where though that you would say, if the goal is to get some at 30, then I think the government needs to fill that gap. But I think it's reasonable because it's the bigger need, from what I understand, is that not at 70, but at 50% AMI, right? So if you want to get some at 50, then change the scale a bit.
The other challenges within, and we have a question as well.
Okay.
So I want to make sure we get to the question. But the other thing, just for consideration, is the fact that sometimes it's understanding that there are differences in unit types. I know oftentimes from the MPDU perspective, you'd like to have 3 bedrooms as opposed to, sometimes you want larger units. And sometimes the ability to vary that requires thinking outside the box, because developers often don't provide 3-bedroom units because it's too costly to provide a 3-bedroom MPDU.
Mm-hmm.
And so the ability to play within that, as long as there's an understanding of economics, may actually change the calculus with regard to how many units you're providing. In other words, it may not be 12 or 15%. It might be 10%, but the end net benefit is you may actually accept getting a fewer number of larger units, because that may actually be.
Well, I think it's a negotiation, but I think an easier negotiation is you still keep it at whatever, 15%, 12.5%, but just vary the
I'm not disagreeing. I'm just offering other ideas,
Yeah.
because I think there's a lot of places where the current system falls short, because, and as say, this is a developer, not that we game the system, but that the economic impact is so severe that we simply just don't even provide the units.
And Rockville's doing a sliding scale, by the way, and I know tomorrow and the HDA talk, so, there is a model out there to look at.
Right, I think so. And then also, you read in the New York Times, maybe a couple of weeks ago, how the county provided a certain type of loan to I think it was EYA, HOC, but they've done it with other people too. So that is a creative financing where, you know, that it helps. The biggest is to get it built. Then once you can get it built and stabilized, then you can go refinance it and stuff like that. So those are kind of good ideas too. I see you smiling.
Well, it's great to have a chair who appreciates, the financing aspect of it.
Right.
Of a project, because at the end of the day, you can plan all you want, you can zone all you want, but if you can't get the financing, you're not going to build anything.
Right.
Let's pause real quick and take the question online. And who was it that had the question?
Kathy, I see
Yeah,
your
hi.
mute, so if you want to ask the question, you have to read it.
Yeah, this is Kathy Fowler with On the Mark Media. I was just wondering if you've thought about 3D printing for housing. There's companies that are doing entire developments, and with the 3D printing, you're able to print faster. They're concrete bases, so they're, you know, they're stronger, they're more eco-friendly, and they're less expensive. Is that something you guys have thought?
Well, I mean, that is a great idea. This is not something anyway, I think it'd be great to talk to the builders. You know, because even 20 years ago, people were talking about manufactured housing. There, you know, I'm not sure why more of it hasn't happened. You know, then they start looking at the container housing, or then you manufacture it at the warehouse and just bring it and stack it. And because there's easier, you know, there's less variability that way. I think, you know, talking to home builders would be a good discussion about different product types. I think any wet time you can make it faster, it's you know, it's better off for all. So good suggestion.
There's a US company that's doing things all over the country, but they're also starting to build houses in Ukraine. So anyway, I would love to put them in touch with you.
Yeah, if you could put in the email me, you know, that information, that'd be great. I'd love for my staff to look at it.
Great, thank you.
Sorry. In the same sort of vein about affordability and just the trajectory of the county, you know, the county executive has really great climate goals. Of course, the state has their own climate goals. I think we are ahead of them by 10 years, which is great. Obviously, Exelon is very involved in these goals and in the economic development of the county. You guys plan it, we energize it, everybody's happy. So how are you considering the economic development, whether it be commercial or residential, of the county within that space, considering that the county executive wants more electrification and cleaner energy? So is that something that you're thinking about when you're talking about these projects?
Yeah. So we have a big sustainability, initiatives or goals in some of our master plans. We're all about, less fossil fuel. What do you do? Like using natives so that you don't use much. You don't have to use water. We want to get away from grass if you don't have, because it's very water intensive and stuff. So we're really pushing sustainability in our projects and our master plans, and when the project comes for review, we're looking at ways and how to do that. So yes, we're all about those types of things. Solar, pushing any way that you can have less demand on resources. Some of it is just, if you can, in certain quarters, denser development, so you don't. And then green, like we have this in Bethesda plan, we had this thing about, every project should have, at least 35% green cover on the site, so that so yes, we're thinking about all those things and pushing them. So yeah. And
how can I make sure that Pepco is helpful in that? Is there anything that we can do better? Or I'm happy to give you my card.
Yeah, I'd love that, so we can connect you with our planning department and understand. So yes, please do give me your card. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Other questions
Yeah,
or comments for Artie?
Because well, go ahead.
It's related to the financing component that Scott was just discussing. I was speaking with a gentleman from NRP who was discussing a new project opportunity along 355 corridor, and the owner didn't even end up offering it to them because they knew it was never going to pencil out from a financing perspective because of how rent control is impacting. So I understand you. I think you're just saying there is going to be density that's not going to be built because of the constraints of what we're dealing with, and that property is now going to go to a
townhouse. That's something that I don't think people foresaw as we went through that process, but as we go through a tighter and tighter financing, $1.5 trillion is going to come to that here in the next couple of years.
That's just the commercial side. That's just commercial real estate.
Yeah. So I'm not asking for you to give me a comment. This is just
Right.
we look forward and identify ways to navigate the challenges we're in. We're probably going to be taking density off because it's infeasible. And that's with a very successful company who's very well versed in financing affordable construction for affordable housing. And that's the focus, one of the focuses.
Right. Yeah, given the economic, I thank you for the comment. I think that it is tough times in general now, interest rates up, construction costs up. Some projects will be, regardless of some other things happening, will be on the sidelines for a while. And then that's why, so those things I can't control, other than I know in development, it takes, 5, maybe 3, 4 years to get it teed up. And so, if you're not, yeah. So, I know that as a developer, you have to spend a lot of money to get it teed up. And when you get it teed up, the market may not be there for lots of reasons. And that's the sort of some of the risk of development. But, and I hear you. And our goal is to give you more options, right? So when the time is there, and changing these master plans to give you more options so that when the time is right, you can move forward.
Close that real fast. Simultaneously, I do want to acknowledge that I appreciate the new board and its focus on residential. Not that previous boards did anything wrong. It's a nice experience. So
right. But thank you. And then also, any comments, your thoughts you have on how to make the process more efficient, cheaper, Yeah, please let us know. That's really important to us.
We have another question online. Anne?
Thank you. Thank you, Artie. This is really interesting. I have a really basic question. You've hinted at this a little bit, but I'm wondering if you could just speak to how the board interacts with the broader county government on a regular basis. Is it a regular basis or is it quarterly? Are there formal meetings with the county council committee and with the county exec? Is it more that the staff interacting? Just curious how this massive amount of coordination might take place, or how much coordination there actually is across the different governing units.
Yeah, there's a lot of coordination in terms of, so the staff meets with many times, so that our plans we present to council. After the board approves them, they're presented to council, and then initially the council takes them up in committees, right? There's the Fed Committee, Economic Development Committee, Transportation. So then they take them up in their work sessions, and so our staff is there when they have questions. So anytime there's a committee reviewing something that we had recommended, the staff is there. I'm typically there, so because I'm full-time. The other board members are not, they're part-time, so they're not there. I'm there. I'm acting as the lead for the board. I keep the board abreast of what's going on there. And so, yes, there's a lot of coordination. So once it gets through the committee, then it goes to the full council. The staff is there. I'm there and during those meetings or hearings there. So, yep, lots of coordination, lots of meetings that happen in order to get these projects approved. Okay.
I want to mention maybe what is the interaction, say, between the planning board and staff and, say, for example, the school board?
Yes.
Because that's such a big part of what we talk about and deal with in the county is what the school board's doing. Might be helpful for people to know what those interactions are like between you all and them.
So, yeah, good question, Gus. And we just had a dinner meeting with the school board last week.
Right.
And so, and we have that every year. And so one of the things we do is the school projects get approved through mandatory referral. We don't have as much oversight on school development, but we do want to at least, but many times the school sites interact with our park. Sometimes we co-locate our park next to a school so they can use some of the facilities there. So we're coordinating with there. We also want to know early on what they're doing to make sure they generally follow our planning recommendations. Sometimes that can't be totally the same because of things we want for what's in the right of way may interfere because they have buses and stuff from coming to school. We want to make sure the kids can ride their bikes to school, multimodal ways, but sometimes it can't 100% fit because of the way a school runs. But we do approve their forest conservation plans, and so we have the board staff makes a recommendation to the board. So we are working with the school throughout the process on how their facilities are built. Also, we interact with the school in terms of how many the adequate public facility work that we do is based on school numbers, right? School enrollment, when the schools are planning to get built. So there are some interactions there. So yes, we meet with the board once a year, but our staff is meeting with their staff, their development staff, once a month, once every 2 months, to really understand what's going on and getting numbers that we need in order to update our plans regarding APF, adequate public facilities.
And as Artie's describing, that means anyone who's thinking of residential development, it's automatically triggering coordination between what the planning board and staff are doing with what the school board and their staff are doing in terms of the numbers. Elementary school, middle school, high school. So there's that, that Artie's noting that's so important when you talk about residential development. Yeah.
It's one of the things that when they changed this, the way things are looking, you can't stop the development because of the school is quoted at capacity, but you pay an additional fee so that we can build more schools. One of the things they found through some studies is that people always thought that the apartment buildings create so many more students per dwelling unit. And through some studies, they found out it was the single-family homes creating more students, right? And not necessarily per the multifamily buildings creating. So that affected impact taxes, it affected everything like that. So we're doing lots of studies based on school enrollment information and also generation from how many students based on the type of structure built. So I don't know if that answered your question, but, and thank you, Gus, for
Artie, one of the things that I appreciate this idea that you're looking and benchmarking a variety of things. I harp on this with, everybody that comes in, but you're Montgomery County, we are Montgomery County. I'm a county resident, but I'm an owner and developer regionally. I have choices. I can go to Fairfax. I can build in the district. I can go to Loudoun. We own land in Frederick and Prince George's. Do you all look at the impact of impact taxes or the speed with which you can bring a development forward in Montgomery County as compared to Fairfax, or the economics associated with certain policies that the county may undertake that may make Montgomery County less competitive as a place to choose, despite the fact that a lot of the demographics work in our favor? Right. So what do you all do on the planning board side that might improve the climate for economic development overall?
Well, so one of the things we just we're almost completed this development review work group. That was the whole point, was to do all our approvals faster, right? Right. Because listening to the development group, where your teams and stuff, you were saying that it's done faster in Fairfax or whatever, or other. And we're also looking is it really certain pieces of maybe faster, but is the whole process faster, right? And so, and that's what we're doing. It's not just what we do, but it's what DPS does, what all the other.
Well, or
Yeah.
Randall referenced
Randall.
the idea that, you know, all of a sudden now we have, economic disincentive to build in the county because rents are capped. And developers are saying, well, why would I build here? And they'll say, okay, but it's 23 years. You won't buy. We turned down an opportunity to buy an existing apartment building because we don't think we can grow rents fast enough.
Right.
Value added.
Yeah, in Montgomery County. You won't put money into it because we can't retrofit the building any longer because that unit. What?
Not Rockville and Gaither.
Oh, not Rockville and Gaither. Okay.
Yeah.
Fair point.
Yeah.
I am a Rockville resident too, so
Yeah.
fair
Well,
enough.
Yeah.
But
well,
that's I mean, and I recognize you don't have control over that, but you as the planning board can also say back to the council, hey, this decision is bringing forward what we're hearing, or we see a dearth of people bringing forward new plans because of this impact. Developers, by the way, do I want to build residentials or should I just build for sale? I'd love the idea of building missing middle, but the problem is, in certain cases, it's now rental. I'm impacted, not immediately, but long-term, and that's what you want people to think about investing in your county long-term. For sale is still the way people want to go because we've just put constraints in there that otherwise impact us. So I'm just offering that and things for.
Well, we're always looking at how we could do it better. Not just we, but like what are trends in the county? We got a lot of dearth of data of what's going on in the county and economic development. You know, we just had with the council, met with them on the economic development team. What's the net migration of employees around the county? I mean, we study the economic and share it with others so that they can, council can, or the county exec can make decisions about that. So we're a big resource for data.
I just want to confirm what we're doing is benchmarking ourselves against the region to make sure that we remain economically viable.
Can I just add to that? Because I'm glad you brought back the development review process working group, because one of the things, the first thing I wrote was, what's the definition of success? And if it's measured, it can be improved.
Right.
So wondering, how are we going to know when we've hit success?
Right.
So do we,
You know what? Economic development.
Well,
Growth.
you still have to have a number, or, you have to be able to point to, we improved it. This working group, you had this outcome or this impact. So what are we measuring?
Right.
When you say we sped it up, so if we were, let's say, saying that the average time now on a project is easy numbers, a year,
Right.
and we cut it to 6, I mean, you have to be able to benchmark it
Right.
to, was it successful?
Right.
Did it work? And then be able to be nimble enough to quickly recognize that it wasn't what the outcomes didn't meet the definition of success, so therefore you have to tweak it.
Right.
Or recognize that it was great and maybe what elements can we even improve upon again, but you have to be able to have a benchmark.
Right.
And I was wondering what our benchmarks were.
Yeah, well, that's what we're all developing, the benchmarks, because you could go online and go to our development review. There's you can see how long it takes to get a sketch plan approved. You can a site plan approved. You can, I mean, it's.
So those are our goals,
No, those are what it is now.
what it is now.
And then, so we're working with DPS, because it's, to really understand it, is like, you put your plan in and then you got a building permit, right? It's not, you put your plan in, you got a site plan. I mean, so we're gonna we're gonna do all we can to reduce from put your plan in to site plan approval.
What's the goal, like the goal?
Yeah, no, we're working,
50%
yeah.
quicker, 30%
Yeah,
quicker?
but we're working with DPS, all the groups to say, we're gonna work as a team to get a site in 6 months faster, 3 months, but we're and then we're still having discussions with the outside community.
You haven't put a time frame.
No, we're working with the teams this is just, we got some general recommendations of what things we're gonna do. Some things we could do right now, right now, a couple of people have to approve a plat. DPS approves the plat, I approve the plat. Now, one person approves the plat. Now we're working on, can you get plat's electronic signature?
But you're assuming all of that's gonna make it faster. I guess, again, I'd like to see it benchmarked against, so that we can, as a community, see whether or not there was progress.
Right.
Well,
That's
to be fair, the planning department does put out statistics on a regular basis which measure review time.
right, yeah.
And you, there's
And I think-
Our review,
And I
our review
think
times,
we-
our review.
well, that include, you know, how long it takes to get to preliminary plan.
Right,
how long
right,
the site
right,
plan, how
right.
long- So you can see that data.
Right, we can see that,
Yeah.
but we're gonna also coordinate with DPS. Like, so you can know the whole process, because our time, yes, we could reduce our time by half, but if you can't get a building permit at that, then, so the point is, we're gonna look at we're trying to integrate, one of the things that came up, can we integrate the systems? So that you could go online and you could see, this is when the sketch plan came in, and this is when you got your building permit, in one place. That's an ultimate goal.
So just, I know we have another question, but.
Well, we have a
1 year
comment.
from now, when we come back and meet with this group, what should my expectation be?
Well, before he answers, to add information to the question, we have a comment, I'm guessing, if not question, from Debbie Spielberg of the County Executive's Office.
I just wanted to say, one of the things that the county executive wanted to see and has been talking about, and the goal was for the work group, and I don't think this work group recommendations in of itself are going to get there, but there are two major things. One is duplication. There's a duplicative process, and how do you stop duplication? And this issue of lead agency is really critical to the duplication issue. So, so that it's very clear with the lead agency. And one of the recommendations is to go back and review the memorandum of understanding that was between the different agencies. And I think that's very important. And tied to that is certainty. We've been told that one of the obstacles to development in this county is they don't know how long the process is going to take. Average times are one issue, but what's really important is, can I know that I'm going to get through this process in a certain amount of time? And so I think those are two of the really big issues that are important to tackle. I'm not sure this work group got there. It was a very condensed, it was short. There's certainly some taking off points, but I think those are the two major issues.
Right. But, and I will say though, it was the start, right? You ask, what is the, I feel in a few months, we'll be able to come back and say, this was a start. We all continued to talk, and this is what we are going to put together as the certainty of, but that didn't happen, and it wasn't really expected to happen, and because it's a big discussion. And so the other groups are going to work behind the scenes and out of this work group to come up with a longer-term plan. And there will be certainty in the longer-term plan.
One of the problems is that all plans that go to park and planning and to all the county agencies and all the utilities funnel to what's called the Development Review Committee, which is the staff from park and planning and all the county applicable departments and the transportation departments. If it involves the state highway, SHA is there, WSSC, et cetera, et cetera. And over time, what has happened, which is never talked about, is that in the old days, when they sat there in that room and had the plan in front of them, the rule was, if you're here on behalf of DEP or DOT or SHA or WSSC or whatever, you better be ready to make a decision. You better be ready to say yay or nay on this plan that the Development Review Committee is looking at before it goes in front of the planning board and the public for a public hearing. Two things happened when that was that in those days, and this is so important and no one ever talks about it, there was a staff member from the Park and Planning Commission from Planning Department. And his job was to chair that group. And if an agency said, oh, we're not prepared to comment on it, or we don't agree with that agency across the table, so let's delay everything a few weeks and we'll all go back and talk and then we'll all come back again. But the planner who chaired that group, he had enough gravitas. They have an award name for this guy. He had enough gravitas to say, no, we're going to make a decision today, because this thing is set for public hearing for the public and the planning board, and you can be at the public hearing and say what you want to say to the planning board with the public sitting there, and let the planning board decide if this proposal goes or not. Because what happens is that these things are killed behind doors by delay, by that agency or this agency or whatever. One agency, you know how they dealt with this? They just wouldn't go to the meetings. It was called WSSC. So for many, 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 many years, Debbie, WSSC dealt with it by, we won't be in the room. So we can't be put on the spot. See, it's cutting through that nonsense that can solve this process problem more than any study done by 1,000 people. You've got to have someone, and it's got to be someone from the planning department, because at the end of the day, they're the responsible department, because at the end of the day, it's going in front of the planning board and all the agencies, DOT, SHA, WSSC, doesn't matter who they are. They're making a recommendation to the planning board, and the planning board decides if they're going to listen to what DOT wants or they're going to have a waiver, if they're going to do what DPS wants or they're going to have a waiver, because the plan and what is being proposed is more important to the county than some particular little rule that that particular agency is always hung up on every week. That's the reality of the process in Montgomery County. And until that is done, and that is how developments got approved through the process, not approved so much, but got to the planning board for a public hearing, and anyone can show up. DEP can sit there and say, you know, we don't like this, and here's why. We want more trees over there. DOT could show up and say, we think that street needs to be 80 feet wide, not 60 feet wide, and here's why. And the planning board will listen to that testimony and make a decision, you see? And that is huge. And this is something that is never talked about because people get used to the way it's been over the past 15 to 20 years.
So I would say some of the issues are more specific when we talk about lead agency. And for example, in Bethesda on loading docks, so we're talking about specific projects. DOT may be able to weigh in, but they don't have a final say. And some of what we're hearing is that some of the new buildings, the loading docks are inadequate for the trucks. So what are the trucks doing? They're parking in the street, which is what they weren't supposed to do. That never got resolved. If lead agency issues are resolved, it's a way to start to deal with those issues. It's very specific issues that agencies need to be able to weigh in and have some final authority. And there are a number that are around transportation issues, and Department of Transportation has an enormous number of staff who work on these issues, and yet it's not a clear process. And I think one of the important recommendations is lead agency. How do we deal with lead agency? How do we redo that MOU? How do we move forward on that? And I think everyone agrees it doesn't benefit anyone to have a confusing, duplicative process.
But the bottom line is you have to have a pope amongst all those cardinals. Because if you
that's
don't,
the lead agency.
well, but everybody wants to be their own lead agency on this issue, that issue. At the end of the day, well, but I'm just telling you from experience. I mean, I've been at this for 49 years in this county. I can tell you, when you're at a development review committee meeting, and you're sitting around the table and everyone's there, there's 100 ways for any one agency to slow things up enormously. And they know how to do it. And they're the lead agency or whatever. But at the end of the day, if you read the law, which very few people do, at the end of the day, it's the planning board that decides these developments. And the planning board has discretion. If they didn't, there wouldn't be a planning board. Everything would be decided by the staff, which is done by a lot of local governments, including in the DC region. A lot of the stuff we're talking about, it gets approved by the planning board in a public hearing. It's not done this way in other jurisdictions around here. It's done by the staff. Never gets to a planning board, okay? So the reason there's a planning board in Montgomery County is to have a public hearing and everyone has their say. But at the end of the day, I can tell you from experience in and out of government here that there's 100 ways to stop a project, but there's only one way to get it approved, and that's to get it in front of the planning board for a public hearing. They make the final call. And until that bullet is bitten, and that's the way it was in this county until the turn of the century. I'm just telling you.
Yeah, yeah, and so, I mean, Scott could weigh in, you know, if you, Debbie, if you go to these DRC meetings, there are times where the other agencies are not prepared, right? And so then you come in and, you know, they're supposed to have X days to get prepared and go to they're not prepared, or they.
Yeah, and here's the problem also, is that even if they are prepared or they give a comment or whatever, at the end, they still have the permit authority after planning board approval. So if WSSC chooses to show up or not show up or whatever, if they have a comment and needs to be addressed, they're gonna get you a permit. So there's a delay added on to that, or that's a long time ago.
Well, but WSC is also a little bit of a unique beast relative
They're
to
unique.
county transfer and others, so.
So it's a complicated problem that is more than the planning board, the county executive. That's the problem.
But part of the review committee, that one recommendation that all the agencies didn't have a time frame that they had to, so now some of it is,
Get that done.
you used to get that done, so, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so that's where we are.
It's a put up or shut up rule that needs to be enforced. Malcolm Shanneman enforced it. He was the lead planner at Park and Planning. And if an agency sat there and said, we're not prepared, Malcolm Shanneman, who was in the plan, he had the gravitas to sit there and say, well, then we're going to take it as it's okay, and this is going in front of the planning board for a public hearing. And you can testify at the public hearing. We would love to hear from you today, but he knew that they often show up knowing that they're not going to comment, you see.
Yeah.
And I would just say one other thing is that the other important thing that the recommendations are about public engagement. And this recommendation for something like a Citizens Academy, what we heard from our chief equity officer is there are many communities that are impacted, don't understand the process. There's some recommendations to increase notification around the neighborhood, but it goes beyond that and it's more complicated. And so if a decision is going to be made at a public hearing, the public has what is the appropriate interaction for them? And then the pre-development work groups, there is a process where the community is briefed on a particular project, but there's no guidance on to what happens to those comments, how do those get reported, what happens to them, and those kind of things. So I believe that came in the final recommendation as well, is that when the public weighs in, those public comments are heard and addressed. So that's another important part.
I would just point out, they're supposed to be, we have to take meeting minutes and we have to submit them.
Right.
We got that law enacted 20 years ago.
Yeah, so we do provide that as a requirement of our applications.
Yeah.
So we're at time. Thanks for coming, Artie.
Yeah.
We could be here all day. As you heard, there are lots of opinions in the room, lots of different great ideas. More than anything, we wanted to thank you for coming. And thank you for all the hard work that you do. Thank you for chairing our esteemed planning board. You obviously have but you have a very healthy business contingent here that effectively just wants to make sure that you are successful in your job so our county is ultimately successful.
Well, thank you, Bob.
And thank you all.
Yeah.
Gus,
And next month, we'll be back here at this table with Pam Dunn of the council staff. Pam is in charge of plans and land use and that sort of thing, working for the council. So,
And Levu for zoning.
and, right, exactly. So, look forward to seeing you all. And Artie, thank you for that
Yeah,
great
yeah,
presentation.
yeah.
And all the best of success.
Yeah, and thank you for your support.
Oh, hell.
Yeah, you and Casey know the process, and so thank you
Well,
for.
hell, I mean, before they made me chairman, I was 6'4" and had a lot of hair. Now look at me now, I'm an empty shell of a human being. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody online.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Good job,
Thank
Bob.
you, thank
Good